Wake up, before the winds of suffering shake your very foundation, before the storm arrives to break you open, before you fall to your knees, crying for mercy from a life you refuse to understand. Wake up, not because the world is ending, but because you have forgotten who you are. Look around you. People move as if life is infinite, rushing between tasks, drowning in distractions. They scroll, they chase, they grasp. They believe happiness is just one purchase, one lover, one achievement away. They ignore the whispers of their soul until it screams through anxiety, illness, and despair. But this suffering is not punishment. It is the call, the gentle nudge of the universe asking you to return. Return where? Return to presence, return to awareness, return to truth, return to yourself. Because you don't need to die to be reborn, you only need to wake up. The Buddha didn't teach a religion, he taught liberation. He didn't ask for blind belief, he invited direct experience. So listen now, not with your ears, but with your whole being. What you are about to hear is not a sermon, it is a mirror, a reflection of what your heart already knows but your mind has forgotten. You are not your name, you are not your job, you are not your pain, your past, your desires, or your fears. You are awareness itself, vast, luminous, and free. That you have fallen asleep in the dream of separation. You believed the mind when it said, I need more. You believed the ego when it whispered, you are not enough. You believed the world when it promised, this next thing will make you whole. And now you are exhausted. You've chased shadows, built castles in the sand, and called it success. You've silenced your spirit for the applause of strangers. You've traded your stillness for stimulation, your peace for performance, your truth for survival. But none of that is your fault. This world conditions you to forget, but now you are here. And this voice, these words, are not mine alone. They are the voice of the Dharma, the echo of awakening, calling you home. Not home as in a place, but home as in a way of being. And the first step is to see, not with your eyes, but with your wisdom, because right now you are seeing the world through the lens of your conditioning. You are not reacting to reality, you are reacting to your story about reality. You suffer not because of what is, but because of what you think it means. A single thought can trigger a lifetime of pain. I am unworthy. They abandoned me. I'll never be happy. But these thoughts are not truth. They are echoes of old wounds, and yet you live as if they are law. So stop, breathe. In this moment, drop every narrative. Forget your plans, your problems, your promises. Forget the roles you play and the masks you wear. Just sit as you are. Feel your breath, this sacred rhythm, ancient and eternal. Feel your heartbeat, each pulse a reminder. You are alive. Not someday, not when things get better. Right now, this moment is the doorway, not to escape, but to return. To clarity, to peace, to now. Because when you are fully here, the mind loosens its grip. And suddenly, life becomes spacious, not because it changed, but because you did. And this is the gift of awakening, the ability to see clearly, to see through the illusions that keep you bound. Do not wait for your body to collapse to value its silence. Do not wait for your relationships to end, to realize their sacredness. Do not wait for death to finally appreciate life. Wake up now. There is no salvation in the future, no freedom in someday. Liberation begins the moment you turn inward. Look, everything is impermanent. The seasons change. The stars die, the mountains erode. The waves rise and fall. Why then do you cling? To people, to status, to comfort, to certainty. Why do you fight the tide of impermanence with the weapons of control? Clinging is suffering, not because things leave you, but because you believed they wouldn't. Not because love fades, but because you demanded it stay. Not because life changes, but because you refuse to change with it. Let go, not in despair, but in deep understanding. Let go because to hold on is to drown. This is the wisdom of the Buddha, that freedom is not the absence of pain, but the absence of resistance. You suffer not because life hurts, but because you believe it shouldn't. You believe peace comes when things are finally perfect. But what if peace comes when you stop expecting perfection? Peace is not in the next thing, it is in the next breath. If you can truly be here, just here, with this breath, with this heartbeat, with this silence, then you have touched the sacred, and from here, the journey begins. Not a journey of more, but of less. Less ego, less noise, less fear, until what remains is the truth. You are not lost. You were never lost. You only forgot the way back. But the path is always here. It is not in the Himalayas, not in temples or books. It is not held by priests or gurus. The path is under your feet, the silence between your thoughts, the space before your next breath. To walk it requires nothing except honesty. Are you willing to meet yourself without judgment? Are you ready to face your shadows without flinching? Are you prepared to dismantle every false identity until only truth remains? Then come, not with effort, but with openness, not with pride, but with presence. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to be spiritual. You only need to be willing, because the Buddha never said become better. He said know yourself, and to know yourself you must stop running, stop numbing, stop pretending. Sit, breathe, listen. There is a silence within you that has never been broken, a clarity untouched by trauma, by time, by thought. That is your refuge, that is your home, and from that place your life begins to change. Not because you manipulate it, but because you align with it. Not because you force, but because you flow. You begin to live not from fear but from insight, not from craving, but from compassion, not from scarcity, but from trust. You don't react, you respond. You don't rush, you witness. You don't cling, you allow. And in that allowing, you are free. Free not from the world, but from the illusion that the world controls your peace. This is the invitation of the Dharma, not to escape, but to return, not to become someone else, but to remember who you already are. So wake up, not because you are broken, but because you are ready, and the time is now. You see, awakening is not an explosion. It is a soft unfolding, not the strike of lightning, but the melting of ice. It begins in the simplest ways, the moment you realize you are not your thoughts, the second you see anger arise, and instead of becoming it, you observe it. The instant you catch the craving before it possesses you, and say, ah, there you are again, that is the birth of wisdom, not dramatic, not loud, but profound beyond words. Because in that small pause you reclaim your life. You begin to live not in reaction, but in response, not in conditioning, but in clarity. You start to realize that the one who suffers, the one who panics, the one who clings was never really you. It was a phantom, a construct made of memory, fear, culture, and comparison. And the moment you see through it, the spell begins to break. But let me be clear. This path is not one of passive calm. This is not about smiling while the world burns. It is about courage. The courage to feel fully. The courage to look honestly. The courage to let go of everything that is false, even when it defines your identity. And so you begin to unlearn. Unlearn the myths of the modern world. That you must always be busy to have value. That more things mean more happiness. That success is measured in applause, that vulnerability is weakness. You begin to see through the game, the endless loop of when this then that thinking. When I get that job I'll rest. When they love me, I'll feel enough. When I make that money, I'll be secure. But none of those promises deliver, because they're built on illusion. They're built on seeking outside what only exists within. Real peace is not a destination, it's a foundation. Real strength is not in control, it's in surrender. And real joy is not in possession, it's in presence. This is the spiritual revolution. Not to become something greater, but to return to something simpler. Yourself as you are, free from delusion. So let's talk about belief. Not belief as in dogma. Not belief as in rigid systems handed down without question. But the kind of belief that emerges from experience. What do you believe truly? Do you believe the world is against you? That life owes you something? That pain means failure? That joy is reserved for the lucky? Pause and examine. Where did these beliefs come from? Your family? Your culture? A moment of heartbreak? Beliefs shape perception, and perception becomes reality. But beliefs can be questioned, and through questioning, they can dissolve. The Buddha said, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that something agrees with reason and is conducive to the good, then accept it and live up to it. This is not blind faith. This is clarity. When you drop false beliefs, something miraculous happens. You no longer see the world as out there attacking you. You see the world as a reflection of your inner state. Your relationships change, not because others become perfect, but because you stop demanding perfection. Not because you avoid conflict, but because you meet conflict with curiosity, not defensiveness. You stop trying to win, and you start trying to understand. This is discernment, a deeper kind of knowing, not judgment, but wisdom. To know when to speak and when to listen, when to act, and when to wait, when to let go and when to stand firm. This discernment isn't taught in schools. It arises when you slow down, when you create space, when you allow silence to be your teacher. Because in the silence, the truth surfaces. You realize that not every emotion requires a reaction. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every invitation is aligned with your path. You begin to live not by default, but by vision. And this vision is not about goals. It's about direction. A vision of the kind of human you want to be. Not just what you want to achieve, but what you want to embody. Do you want to radiate peace, even in chaos? Do you want to love without needing to own? Do you want to walk through this life lightly, leaving no harm behind? Then you must return again and again to your why. Why are you here? Not in the cosmic sense, but in this exact moment. Why are you listening to this voice? Why are you seeking truth now? Somewhere deep inside, you know the answer. You are tired. Tired of being led by fear. Tired of being at war with yourself. Tired of chasing things that never satisfy. You are not broken. You are awakening. And from this awakening comes a sacred fire. Purpose. But true purpose is not about titles or platforms. It is not about being seen. It is about being real. You begin to move not for applause, but for alignment. You speak not to impress, but to express. You act not from ambition, but from compassion. And every step becomes sacred. Even washing dishes becomes an act of presence. Even walking becomes meditation. Even silence becomes symphony. Because you are not waiting for life to begin. You are living it now. And yet, this path requires discipline. Not the harsh discipline of punishment, but the gentle discipline of devotion. The discipline to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. The discipline to return to the breath when the mind races. The discipline to choose presence over pleasure, truth over comfort. This discipline is what transforms insight into embodiment. Anyone can have a spiritual experience, but can you live with spiritual awareness while stuck in traffic, while heartbroken, while doubting everything? Can you show up to your life with reverence, even when it feels meaningless? That is the real test. And here we arrive at action. Because wisdom without action is like a flame without fuel. What you know must translate into how you live. Your peace must touch others. Your clarity must shine through your choices. You begin to live less for yourself and more through yourself. You stop asking, what do I want? And you start asking, what does this moment ask of me? And often the moment asks not for more, but for less. Less noise, less ego, less resistance. And in that lessness, there is fullness. You begin to live in a state of gratitude, not as a practice, but as a posture. You stop waiting for extraordinary moments to feel thankful. You find the sacred in the ordinary, the softness of your pillow, the sound of rain, the laughter of a stranger, the silence between words. Gratitude shifts everything. It softens the hard places inside. It reminds you that even this, even now, is enough. And through gratitude, you awaken your natural adaptability, because life will never stop changing. But suffering is optional. You can meet change with fear or with curiosity. You can see endings as loss or as transformation. You can resist, or you can ride the wave. Like water, you begin to flow around obstacles instead of fighting them. You learn to bend without breaking. This is resilience, and resilience is not toughness. It's softness that survives. It is the strength to rise again without bitterness, to love again without armor, to try again without expectation. And from this resilience comes humility. You no longer pretend to know everything. You no longer need to be right. You realize how vast life is, and how small your grip on it has been. So you begin to listen more, to learn more, to bow more, not out of weakness, but out of awe. Because now everything becomes a teacher. The breeze, the pain, the delay, the joy. Each moment a doorway into presence, and each person you meet, a reflection of your inner world. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is this teaching me? And the answers come, not in words, but in knowing, a quiet wisdom that moves like wind through the trees. You become less concerned with being someone, and more devoted to being no one, just a vessel, a witness, a field of awareness through which life moves. And in that emptiness, you are You see now, don't you? The truth is never hidden. It is simply overlooked. You were never separate. You only believed you were. You were never unloved. You only forgot the source of love lives within. You were never powerless. You only gave your power away to illusions. And now, in this moment, you are remembering. But what happens when remembering fades? Because it will. You will still be human. You will forget again. You will fall into distraction, irritation, and the aching pull of desire. You will feel the storm rise in your chest, the mind spinning its web of thought, the heart closing in fear, the body tightening in resistance. This is not failure. This is the path. The path is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You return to the same wound, again and again, but each time with greater awareness. You fall, but you fall softer. You suffer, but you suffer more consciously. You return, but you return quicker. Because awakening is not a state to achieve. It is a rhythm to remember. And in remembering, you train the heart. You train the heart in patience, not by waiting, but by accepting. You train the heart in compassion, not just for others, but for the parts of yourself still learning how to be free. You hold space for the anger that arises, the sadness that surges, the joy that unexpectedly blooms. You do not chase the joy or reject the pain. You welcome them all as guests. This is what it means to live in equanimity, not to be numb, but to be open, to let the winds of life pass through you without losing your center. And in this openness, something remarkable awakens. A kind of loving presence that sees all things clearly without needing to fix them. That presence is you. You, before the story. You, before the roles. You as awareness itself. From this space, you do not seek meaning. You reveal it. Every moment becomes sacred because you are there for it. No longer somewhere else in thought. No longer buried in resistance. You are simply here. And this presence becomes your power. Not the power to control, but the power to respond. To respond to life with intelligence, with kindness, with depth. This is what we call mindfulness. Not just a practice, but a way of being. You eat with mindfulness. You walk with mindfulness. You speak with mindfulness. You bring your full self to each act, no matter how small, and the small becomes great. This is the quiet revolution of the spiritual path. The world teaches you to be extraordinary. The Dharma teaches you to be present. The world says be more, do more, prove yourself. But the Buddha whispers, be still, be here, and freedom, true freedom, begins when you no longer need anything to be different in order to feel peace. You see the chaos, the injustice, the sorrow of this world, and yet you don't collapse. Because your peace is no longer dependent on circumstances. It arises from clarity, and clarity brings compassion. Not the fluffy kind, not pity, but the fierce compassion that says, I will not turn away from suffering. I will not abandon myself. I will not numb my heart just to function. This is bravery. To keep your heart open in a world that begs you to shut down. To feel fully and still act with wisdom. To love people even when they cannot love you back in the way you imagined. To offer presence even when your ego wants to disappear. This is the flowering of the awakened heart. Not just silence, but service. Not just insight, but embodiment. Because realization without embodiment is incomplete. The Buddha did not sit under the Bodhi tree just for himself. He rose, he walked, he taught, he served. And so must you. Let your life be your teaching, not by preaching, but by being. By living with such sincerity, such authenticity, that your presence becomes a refuge for others. Let people feel safe in your silence. Let them feel seen in your eyes. Let them taste truth in your words, not because you are trying to teach, but because you are living from truth. This is not a path of performance. It is a path of return. And in this return, you will be asked to face your shadow, not to destroy it, but to understand it. To sit with the parts of you that are scared, angry, needy, jealous. To stop running from them, and instead invite them into the light. You say to your fear, come, let me see you. You say to your rage, tell me what you need. You say to your loneliness, you are welcome here. And slowly, the shadow loses its grip, because it no longer needs to scream to be heard. You are listening now, and in listening, you become whole again. You stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You stop editing your soul just to be liked. You realize you are not here to please others. You are here to remember truth, to embody truth, to serve truth. And sometimes truth is quiet. It does not compete. It does not shout. It does not perform. But when you are still enough to hear it, it becomes undeniable. It says, you are not your trauma. You are not your thoughts. You are not your titles or your tears. You are the sky, not the storm. And so you begin to trust, not in outcomes, not in fate, but in the intelligence of the moment. You stop trying to control the river. You begin to float, not in passivity but in surrender. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is giving in to what is real. It is aligning with the flow of life instead of fighting it. It is moving with the seasons of your soul. There are days for action, and there are days for rest. There are times to speak, and times to listen. There are seasons to plant, and seasons to release. You begin to honor these cycles within yourself. You stop rushing healing. You stop forcing clarity. You let things unfold. And in that allowing you find rhythm. You live with grace. And grace is not perfection. It is presence amidst imperfection. It is the gentle hand on your own back when you fall. It is the smile that rises when there is no reason to smile. It is the quiet confidence that says, no matter what happens, I will meet it with love. This is the vow of the spiritual warrior, not to escape pain, but to be so deeply rooted in presence that pain cannot shake you from your truth. Not to avoid discomfort, but to walk through discomfort with dignity. Not to find shortcuts, but to walk the full path with open eyes, open heart, open hand. And this path, though solitary, is never lonely. Because the more awake you become, the more deeply you feel the interconnectedness of all life. You realize there is no you without us. There is no separate self, sealed off in isolation. We are the breath of one great organism. When you suffer, the world feels it. When you heal, the world is nourished. When you wake up, you do not wake up alone. You carry the prayers of your ancestors, the hopes of future generations, the unspoken pain of strangers on the street, and you walk gently, not out of guilt, but out of reverence. Reverence for this brief, beautiful chance to live as a human being, to love, to fall, to rise, to remember, and ultimately, to return to silence, to stillness, to simplicity. The path is not far. It is only one breath away. One moment of honesty, one act of letting go, one decision to come home to yourself. So stop waiting. Don't wait for life to fall apart. Don't wait for illness or heartbreak to begin the search. Don't wait for a crisis to find your soul. Wake up now, because the truth is not in some distant temple. It is here, in your breath, your body, your being, and it is waiting to be lived. So now here you are, at the edge of something ancient, a doorway not made of wood or stone, but of understanding, a threshold not crossed with your feet but with your presence, and the invitation is clear. Wake up, not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, not when life slows down, because everything you've been searching for, the peace, the clarity, the love, the meaning, it has always been inside you, quietly waiting beneath the noise, waiting for this moment. And here is the most liberating truth of all. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to know every teaching, chant every mantra, or sit in stillness for hours. You only need one thing, the willingness to look within. Because the Buddha was not a god. He was a human being who sat down beneath a tree and refused to run. He didn't escape the world. He embraced it with eyes wide open. He faced his demons, his doubts, his illusions, and he saw through them. And when he rose, he was free, not because the world had changed, but because he had. You have that same capacity right now. You can choose presence over distraction, compassion over reaction, stillness over stimulation. You can choose to breathe, not just to survive, but to awaken. And from that breath, a new world begins. A world not built on fear, but on freedom, where you don't need to chase approval, because you rest in self-knowing, where you don't cling to control because you trust the intelligence of life, where you don't numb your pain, but honor it as a doorway to healing. This is the path of the awakened one, not a life without challenge, but a life without delusion. You will still cry, you will still grieve, you will still stumble and fall, but you will not be lost, because you have learned how to return to breath, return to silence, return to truth. And slowly, everything begins to transform. Your conversations become sacred because you speak from depth, not defense. Your relationships become softer because you hold space, not conditions. Your work becomes meaningful, not because of praise but because of purpose. Even your suffering becomes sacred because it shows you where you are still asleep. And you bow to it, not in submission, but in reverence. You begin to live as if every moment matters, because it does, as if every breath is a miracle, because it is, as if every being is your teacher, because they are. This is not a fantasy. This is not reserved for saints or monks or mystics. This is your path too. No matter where you've been, no matter how far you've strayed, no matter how long you've been asleep, the Dharma is always here. The breath is always here. The truth is always here. And so you rise, not as someone new, but as someone true. You walk gently. You speak slowly. You listen deeply. You no longer seek to escape life. You allow life to shape you, carve you, open you. You begin to see beauty where you once saw boredom. You begin to feel peace where you once felt pressure. You begin to taste joy in the most ordinary things. A cup of tea, a bird in flight, the softness of morning light. And you realize you never needed to go anywhere. You never needed to become someone else. You only needed to wake up to what already is. The sun has always risen. The breeze has always blown. The love has always been here. Now finally, you are here too. Present, awake, alive. So go. Go not to chase, but to serve. Go not to prove, but to share. Go not to fix the world, but to love it more clearly. Let your presence be a reminder that peace is possible. Let your actions be a teaching that truth is living. Let your breath be your prayer. And when you are tired, rest. When you are broken, breathe. When you are lost, sit in stillness. And remember that the Buddha walked before you, not to be worshipped, but to show the way. And now it is your turn, not to follow blindly, but to walk bravely, to walk with eyes open, heart open, hands open, because you are the path, you are the practice, you are the presence the world needs. Wake up. The world doesn't need another follower, it needs another lighthouse. And you were born to shine, not with effort, but with essence, not with noise, but with stillness, not for fame, but for truth. So walk on, not to escape, but to embody, not to transcend, but to include, not to become something else, but to fully become what you already are. Awareness, compassion, freedom, light. This is your time. This is your path. This is your awakening. Wake up, now.